for us, what it is that our leaders are passing into law, or bills that they're passing into law, and how it is that we've been able to shift that conversation and shift that entire happening. Then we also do have Svetlana, who is the co-founder and director of Tandem Network, which is a marketing content agency in Kenya. She is a passionate digital evangelist who leverages the power of content to shape perception and behavior and build movements, which is one of the things that you can witness with Sky Girls, which is a sisterhood of teen girls who are all about being true to themselves and what they believe in. With its focus on the deep-seated desires of adolescent girls, the program has been teaching young women to wield the power of choice, and more so, to belong to communities that cherish these choices. She has also been held marketing and movement building roles with different organizations, including Sony Electronics, and she is a master's degree holder of international business from Rikyo University. So I again want to welcome them so much. I want to say thank you for being a part of this conversation. And just anyone from the DD team can let me know if they have been upgraded to panelists so we can continue with this conversation.
So yes, we have one of the panelists that's joining, and the other is still as an attendee. So I would request the host to allow for that to be actioned.
So Moses, I've made you the host. Maybe you can be able to also do that for us, please.
Okay, on it. Oh yeah, so if yeah, she's rejoining as host. Now I do believe we have both. Yeah, so I think we're good now.
Okay, yeah, so I can invite our panelists to just say hi. We can start with Washera and then Svet.
Okay, hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Washera. Thank you so much for the introduction, Rashid. Yeah, my name is Washera Thande, and as you described, I am a social worker, educator, and a pastor. When I said the term pedagogy, it's the style of teaching that people use. And because I love and enjoy teaching and educating myself, that's why I like using that term for pedagogy of change. What was the question that you had asked, Rashid? Because I'm not sure. I don't know if I should reintroduce myself because you've already introduced me.
I don't feel free. Introduce yourself. Say hi. Tell the people who you are, give us a better insight into yourself.
So yeah, so my background is in social work. I'm a qualified social worker. And I recently just completed my master's in social development. So I have a lot of knowledge in development. So development in terms of like in the development world, so social policy, governance, and understanding poverty, etc. I love learning and I love reading and I love teaching people. Yeah, that's my brief introduction. And I'm really excited to be here to have this conversation with the two panelists as well.
Super. Thank you so much for honoring our invite. And then let me also invite Svetlana to introduce herself, and then we can move on.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Do I appear as Svetlana? Because I'm not sure. I can't.
As Evelyn.
Evelyn.
Yeah, it's
that's so weird.
The link. No, it's okay. But you can really.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Okay, hi. Thanks so much for having me here. Thank you, Rashid. I have been working with development dynamics for about 2 or 3 years now through Sky Girls program. And of course, when I was invited, I wanted to be part of this panel. I have been a marketer for about 13 to 14 years across Asia. So I started my career in Tokyo, Japan, then moved to Singapore, where I was in charge of brand and marketing communication for multiple lines of Sony products. across Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And after working in Asia for about eight years, I moved to Kenya. And yeah, so far it's been what, my 9th year in Kenya. So it has been an amazing journey. I started my company, Tandem, about 6 years ago, and I basically dove into social marketing about 5 years ago. And since then, everything that I do when it comes to marketing and communication changed drastically, because I was always driven by a mission of positively impacting society and people's life through communication. And I strongly believe that sometimes, communication actually plays such an important role. Like, look what's happening on Twitter now, right? The whole movement is just driven by just text. But it's so powerful that you can't miss it, and it evokes so much emotion. So to me, I was always fascinated with some powerful behavior change, social marketing campaigns that really can change perceptions, change attitudes, and eventually really change the quality of your life, your perspectives, and how you live life and how you make choices. So when we launched the Sky Girls initiative in Kenya, that's where I got to put everything that I know when it comes to marketing, communication, and practice, but from a different prism of now behavior change. And since then, we worked with not only with Sky Girls initiative, but also with other projects by UNICEF, by GIZ, around behavior change. So I'm very, very passionate about this topic. I'm very passionate about communication. When you asked something about what shapes movement or something like that, and that response around focusing on people, not the issue, was from me. And I hope I will be able to unpack it during this panel, because that's what I strongly believe in.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Svet. So maybe we can just start off with you. We did start engaging the audience, talking about their own definition of movement building. So maybe I can just ask you, how would you define movement building in your own words, and even with the work that you've been doing?
Sure. So movement building, it's like a behavior change model. There is a framework to it, right? Movement building cannot be done overnight. It's something that requires articulation and structure. Because if you guys are familiar with the behavior change framework, there is a pre-contemplation phase where you're not aware of any issues, right? Because I strongly believe that the movement is always focused around certain tension, right? Whether it's internal personal tension, whether it's external societal tension. So there's always somewhat tension that trigger the movement. But in the behavior change model, there is a pre-contemplation phase that when you're not aware of the tension. It's kind of there, but you're just not paying attention. Then there is a contemplation stage where you start noticing things, and you start noticing that it somewhat affects your life, right? So it's kind of that steady process. After contemplation, there is an action. We decide that, okay, so I gotta take some stance here. I gotta make a choice. And I gotta act on it. Then there is a maintenance stage where you deliberately staying away from beliefs, from habits, from some actions that drove your, or maybe contributed to that tension, right? And then if kind of movement or behavior change is successful, then you kind of stay in this in that phase, right, of just maintaining and eventually embracing these new beliefs, new habits, new perspectives. If you're not successful, then you're relaxing and you're starting the journey. So when we were launching Sky Girls Initiative, it was Sky Girls Initiatives is just generally a movement for teen girls. And our job was just to unite girls empower them with choices, right? Empower them with the belief that they deserve making choices for themselves. In behind, or as a core of Sky, we had specific issues because Sky was launched initially as a tobacco prevention initiative. And then we also worked on HIV prevention, right? So the problem exists out there, right? So that's the issue. But the reason why I keep saying that we always focus on people and not the issue is Sky is being a really good example of that. Because if you follow Sky, you will never see any direct messages around don't smoke, or smoke will cause lung cancer, or smoke will affect your health. Because in that case, you're actually focusing on issues. But when you start focusing on people, your communication changes completely. And that creates a very powerful movement, and that creates a community. For Sky, for example, we understood that when it comes to tobacco prevention or smoking in general, it has nothing to do with the desire to smoke. It has everything to do with the desire to belong. Right?
Yeah.
So we had to deal with the perception that most teen girls smoke, or most teenagers smoke. I have to smoke to look cool. I have to smoke to fit in. Right? So we started creating movement where we normalizing girls not smoking, but not talking about the issue. We were talking about passion points that are far more powerful than that habit, right? We were talking about dancers. We were building aspirational models, and then through those models, we were seeding the message around what they aspire, what they desire, what they achieve in life by deliberate choices of following their dreams and staying away from things that they're good without. Right?
Yeah.
So our movement was really focusing on desires and aspirations. That's a translation of why is it important to focus on people? Because when it comes to movement, people are always driven by two things. Either by fear or aspiration, right? Whatever I do, it's either to survive or thrive, right?
Yeah.
So, and it had nothing to do with actual problem, with the actual issue. It's everything to do with surviving or thriving, right? So to me, building the movement is really focusing on the emotions, right? So whatever happens now in Kenya, what is that emotion? Are people driven mainly by fear? I am scared what the future will look like if I don't act on it. Or I am moved by desire and aspiration for better future, and that is a more stronger pull. In any case, everyone right now are united by the emotion.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question though.
No, yes, you have absolutely answered the question, and thank you so much for that. I think just listening to you and the whole aspect of how you approached the conversation with regards to the work that you're doing with Sky Girls makes me wonder, which leads to the next question. How important is data and research in building a sustainable movement?
Absolutely, it's important, and for us, I think this is one of the programs that are really data driven. Everything that we do is being measured. We go through very extensive measurement and evaluation procedures, right? At the very beginning of our program and at the very end. So our first phase of Sky has ended a few months ago, right? So we're actually in the second phase where we added new issues. So for us, it was very important not to measure ourselves at the beginning as a baseline and at the end, but also have these, intermittent kind of data to understand whether what we're doing is actually effective, right? How do you prove the efficacy of your work through, household surveys, through phone surveys, through focus groups, through formative research and all that. So we're constantly getting this data. Sky Girls program was launched in Kenya in 2020. Since then, we had different types of evaluations, like at least twice a year. And that would give you a lot of interesting stats, right? That helps you to now re-strategize, optimize your communication. So for example, initially when we launched Sky, with our perception that, okay, so we want to build this amazing aspirational movement. So let's hire the most beautiful models. Let's dress them up nicely. Let's, do a proper makeover. So we launched that, right? And the girls told us, these are not us. They don't look like us. They don't sound like us. So don't even, so when they say it's nice, but they will never engage with it because they could not relate, right? And this was literally done within first 4 months of Sky launch. Right, and we were launching during COVID, so it was we actually overcame a lot of barriers to bringing this program to girls, but still those who engaged with us said, amazing, but they're not us.
Yeah.
So we quickly had to re-strategize. We brought in girls on board. We featured real girls. We featured real stories and all that. The next survey, they told us Sky Girls are for rich. Okay, it's only for rich girls. We re-strategized again. We went to slums. We went to lower income communities. We remapped our catchment area. We did a lot more activations there. We partnered with certain organizations like Maisa, for example. We started featuring those girls. We started having movie screenings in those areas like Matare, Kangemi, Kawangware, and all. We started bringing those girls, like some of the hosts or actors in our TV dramas or pop culture shows are actually girls from Atari. Now they're a lot more popular. Now they're out there. But when we were hiring them, no one knew about them. They did not believe in themselves, So we started bringing those girls in. And it's not just about, creating something that is a reflection that your audience can see themselves in, but also testing the effectiveness of your messaging, right?
Yeah.
And that also always requires some data, always. So I give you an example. For our tobacco prevention initiative, when we did our end line, we realized that the whole aspiration around tobacco dropped from 90% to 73%. Right? So it was like there was a significant kind of drop. 83% of girls who came across Sky started believing that they're in control of their future, that they can decide what the future look like. They started thinking about it, right? When it comes to HIV prevention initiative, we did a controlled kind of controlled evaluation where we did a 8-week Sky Club program. We brought in everything that we've created and everything that we've launched within 3 years, and we kind of compressed it into 8 weeks Sky Club kind of initiative, and we did it outside of our catchment area, in the area where girls were not aware of Sky, and there was also significant impact just within these 8 months. More girls started believing that they deserve healthy relationship. More girls started believing that, or starting kind of reducing or changing their perceptions and attitudes around HIV. We managed to achieve a significant improvement in when it comes to HIV stigma, So after measuring that, we realized, okay, this approach works, right? We need to continue focusing on people, aspirations, not the issue. And we need to continue getting this feedback. We need to continue featuring girls, and we need to continue telling their stories they can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for that. I love that you bring in the aspect of the community being at the center of designing what is a solution that you're trying to come up with. And that's really, really important. It's always coming back down to who is your target audience, and what does your target audience actually relate and resonate with. And that's a beautiful way to really go about, movement building and ensuring that, you remain relevant to the conversation that is meant to be had. And maybe at this point, I'd like to bring in Washera and Svet tells us about going down to the community, being with the community, talking to the people, understanding their needs and wants, and even just who it is that they'd like to see being presented. But on the other end, and I want to use the example of what has been happening in Kenya with the reject the finance bill hashtag. What we saw with that is that it really emerged from what was happening on online conversations. It emerged from social media, that being TikTok and Twitter, just people telling each other, this is the thing that is happening, we need to do something about it. So maybe my question to you then is, how do you think as movement builders we can strategically use social media and other digital platforms in order to build momentum for our movements?
Thank you for the question, Rashid. Well, it depends. I feel like it's a tough question to answer because it will go into very many different tangents. But I will say the example of the finance bill is one, it was very organic. It was just one thing that set off. It was like there was a trigger that set off everything. However, I have seen different groups of people leverage off of that to engage their communities to mobilize around specific things. So I will say for anyone that seeks to movement build, it would be absolutely foolish to think that you can be on social media, because unfortunately that's where over half the population in Kenya is at. Because 65% of Kenyans are below the age of 35. All of us have social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Another thing is understanding the stats of how far social media has infiltrated. Like the infiltration rates, first of all, of mobile phones in Kenya is the highest in Africa. We have mobile phones in rural areas, etc. But then even TikTok has very high infiltration rates. So yeah, just to re-strengthen my point, to assume that you can't use social media would be foolish. Secondly, I think it's good for any form of okay, so in my background in community mobilizing and working with communities, it's essential to learn how social media works. So understanding how algorithms work, how to capture people's attention, how to leverage my skills as a mobilizer onto the digital world, which is completely different on the ground, and on the digital world are two completely different things. You need to learn how social media works. You need to understand the statistics. You need to know how people engage, what time people engage, and etc. So I guess that's point number 2. And finally, I would say that strategizing is very important. Something that I've seen with a lot of movement builders is they don't create plans. They just do a graphic, post it, and move on with life. But working in social media, funny thing is, when Svetlana, I hope I said your name right, when she mentioned social behavior change, in the previous place that I worked, we did use SBC as an approach to carry out development interventions. And one of the things you have to do is you have to strategize. You have to go through the whole process of using SBC, which starts at understanding the situation, focusing and designing, then creating, and then implementing and monitoring, and then evaluating and replanning. So even for using social media, you need to understand where is your audience, who is your audience, where is your audience at, what can I do to capture that audience? And then you also create a weekly plan, a monthly plan, etc. as you move along.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the advice I give anyone who's movement building and using social media and the digital world,
yeah. And I love that, is that number one, we cannot shy away from the fact that social media is a huge tool. And there's something that you've mentioned that really resonates. It's that as much as it may be a locally kind of a local conversation, but it's connected to the globe in so many different ways. So just being able to strategize around how you're doing this communication on social media, and leveraging it to the best of your ability, because that's where you really hit your target audience. It makes me wonder, sometimes we throw this entire blanket and we cast it's called what? Casting a wide net. Yes. We cast the net wide. But then when we come back to the ground and we come back home, is the aspect of also leadership and coordination. A lot of the times we see that for most of our movements, we have this paralysis when it comes to how does the aspect of leadership come in? How do we also coordinate each other when we're working in collaboration and in coordination? And so even from your experience and from the work that you've been doing, what do you see as some really interesting and effective governance models or leadership models that are can be used for maintaining that momentum and direction within a movement?
One thing I don't know any leadership models or like governance models because I haven't studied any of that, so I don't want to mislead anyone. But I will say from my experience, I've seen because I've been in multiple committees in different social movements that encapsulate anti-racism, social justice, gender-based violence justice, all of those things. So one thing I will say is a collaborative leadership approach. So working with multiple leaders from different places collectively, that's one thing that I've noticed works really well, because then it helps, it helps with communication, and it also helps reduce logistical issues. Like, for example, I can't go to another organization and approach them and say, we should do this, this, that. I can't go and expect myself to lead them, and they already have a leader. That's one. Secondly, I will touch on, like, for example, right now with the Reject Finance Bill protest, everybody keeps asking us in Kenya, oh, so who's your leader? Are you guys gonna come up with a leader? Are you going to have one leader, etc.? And I honestly think that's a flawed way of looking at leadership, mostly because, as we've seen in Kenyan politics, we've had one leader. We've always had one figurehead who leads specific movements. So whether that's like the presidency or the opposition. And the thing that I've come to realize as I've studied social movements and also studying history is how unsustainable that model is. One, not only for the person, but also for the movement, because human beings are fickle. If someone dies, if someone gets sick, if someone does it for their self-interest, and the whole movement is infiltrated because of one person. So it's also, and that's why I said like collaborative leadership is understanding that you need to have different mechanisms around an individual that ensure that even if that individual is taken out, or either by dying or like being sick, or if they're sold out, the movement will continue. And one thing I will say is, okay, in my background, also because of studying development, I've studied a lot of like transnational corporations. Yes, they'll have single leaders that lead them, but they have organizational structures that have stayed on regardless of whether that leader comes or goes. So different leaders come and go. They have different faces that lead those organizations, but the organizing structures remain. And that's something I feel like social movements need to adopt. Is a thing that we fail at as well, where we're not able to organize and adapt accordingly when we are trying to fight systemic issues such as gender-based violence, the patriarchy, racism, classism, etc. So one thing I would emphasize is we need to have movement builders need to learn how to create structures and institutions around the movement that will continue and persevere if the quote unquote leaders are no longer there. Yes, I hope I've made sense there. If you have any questions, please just ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny that you say you've not interacted with any leadership models, but you're able to just speak about how leadership should happen. It's the whole aspect of being collaborative with the leadership. It's understanding that there is a need to have structure, and organizing structure within the institution that allows for history to continue, for that continuity to happen. And leadership is just one of the challenges that we are speaking about. And maybe I could move back to you, Svet, and as we speak about movement building, what would you say you've seen as some of the biggest challenges that you have also faced while building and sustaining these movements?
Thank you. That's a really great question. First, I think massive barrier is well, it depends on what level, right? So let's talk about implementation, right? When it comes to implementation, there are institution guidelines, there are some certain processes in place. And sometimes these processes are just not being updated, or they're not being very effective. And that really could stall some, some progress for some programs. So for example, now when we deal with minors, right? To me, we have proven model, we have results. We were ready to be vetted and verified by the institutions, because when I attempted to approach certain ministries, my ask was, this is my program, please go ahead and vet me. I provide all the documentation, because to me, I would like to engage girls in a safe environment, and the safest environment for us would be schools. So, sometimes we never gotten direct no, but there was also no facilitation to actually proceed, right? So I think sometimes, and I understand why certain things are happening. Certain things are happening because, yes, you can't risk to give access to, let's say, schools, to any organization without proper vetting them, right?
Yeah.
But then when it comes to vetting, there is no structure in place. Like there is no clarity what follows what are the requirements, right? So that was one of the biggest barrier for implementation and the outreach. Another barrier was that I think a lot of redundancy and a lot of, well, redundancy is not necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of a duplicated efforts that are not aligned, right? So when, let's say, once a year or twice a year, we're getting into these conferences, with 500 people from different organizations, starting from social marketing agencies to NGOs to ministries to funders, you just realize that you actually have a massive network of experts, professionals, right, that could actually work collaboratively on a certain issue, and that would definitely multiply the positive impact of certain things. So for example, when it comes to HIV, right?
Yeah.
Let's say my organization is all about behavior change and communication and demand generation, right? How do I get girls and stakeholders to understand, how to navigate it, right? Because for example, when it comes to HIV, it all starts with dynamics in your relationship, right? How can I negotiate and resist sexual pressure? How can I make decision? How can I use refusal techniques if I'm not ready? How can I negotiate the use of contraception, right? How do I not give in into pressure? So so that those kind of, this is my area of expertise, right? But when it comes to whenever we address it, by default you reach communities that actually either have such condition, or already have an existing issue. Then who do I signpost? Where is this person needs to go to get treated? And then so on and so on and so forth, so on, right? So for me, there is, I think, that lack of structure and almost like a map, strategic map of stakeholders that are in the same space, but they're performing different roles, really would kind of hinder the effectiveness and success of social programs or the movement, right? So back to what Vashera was talking about, the leadership, and she was talking about the institutions and the structure. right? So I think the ambiguity of current, what's happening now is there is a bit of anxiety of where are we going to go, because there is no kind of directives. We don't know who makes decisions. We don't know who has more expertise, right? Because I agree with you. You don't need to have a single leader to make decisions for all, but you need to have leadership. And what is leadership? Leadership is authority and empathy, right? As a leader, I have to be empathetic to, the audience that I'm representing. I need to understand their fears. I need to understand their aspirations and relate, right? And authority is basically your skills and expertise, right? So similar, in our social marketing space or the behavior change space, is how do we map out those experts? How do we map out those organizations, institutions, and leaders, so we can deliver on a specific issue, whether it's HIV, HPV vaccine, whether it's contraception, early pregnancies, drug abuse, gender-based violence, and all that, in a more effective way, right? The loop has to be closed. Then you can actually tackle it, right? So I think those two things, first is bureaucracy and really like kind of a lack of clarity. What is a step-by-step process? And the second is a lack of structure and visibility of their kind of strategic stakeholders within the space.
Yeah, super. That is very interesting. And it makes me, kind of leads to the next question, which is for both of you, and we can start with Svet and then we can go to Shera. It's the aspect of also inclusivity. We are mobilizing for a cause. We are trying to bring in as many people as possible to, champion for this, be a part of the movement, be a part of the conversation, be a part of the change that we're trying to see. But at the end of the day, how do we ensure that inclusivity and diversity exists and happens within a movement?
I think one of the easiest questions for that, as someone who studied sociology, is intersectionality. So intersectionality is an idea that was created by a Black author in the States called Kimberly Crenshaw, which means understanding the intersect of the multiple layers of people's identities. So for example, for me as Washera, I'm not only a woman, but I'm an African woman who lives in Kenya in a developing world. So in all those levels of my identity, there's different aspects of the way the world perceives me. So as a woman in a patriarchal world, already I'm perceived a certain way. As an African woman in a world that's largely racist and largely very anti-Black and anti-African, there's already a way I'm perceived. As a Kenyan, I have this identity, but there's a certain way that people perceive me out there. Like I'd be asked out there if I'm a marathon runner because I'm Kenyan, So understanding the multiple layers of people's identities and then seeing the intersects where they intersect. And most times the intersection happens in the individual because I'm a person walking around with multiple layers in my identity.
Yeah.
So one way to deal with the diversity is understanding that people are not homogeneous, they're very heterogeneous. We have multiple identities, we have multiple ways that multiple ways that people are affected by, whether it's class, social, economical issues, gender, sexuality, etc. So in movement building, I would personally say for anyone who is a true leader would need to understand the ills of this world. So for me as a woman, obviously I have a bias of understanding what the patriarchy is and understanding what feminism is. But if you're a good leader, I would expect you to understand how does living in a patriarchal world affect a woman, what are the challenges a woman has if I'm delegating a task to her and she's not able to do them, or if I'm working with a young person coming from a low income background, what are the things that are affecting them economically and socially? If I'm thinking about someone who comes from a different racial background, what are the things that are affecting them because of the race of their race. If I'm thinking about someone who comes from a single parent background or like a caring background where they have to care for people. So as a leader within the mobilizing space, it's important that I think it's important to have that perspective and understand that when you're working with a single person, you're not just working with what you see, there's many other layers to that person. So yeah, I think intersectionality is one key theory that can help practically in ensuring equality and diversity.
Super. I love that. And I'm sure there's one of our DD members, aka Fel, who hears the word intersectionality and gets very excited. Over to you, Svet.
That's nice.
Sorry, can you please repeat the question? Because I just want to make sure that I answer specifically to the question.
Yes, the question is on how do we ensure inclusivity and diversity within a movement?
Oh, okay. So to me, I feel like I'm talking away from equality when it comes to gender equality, because I personally believe that both genders are important, right? I'm always looking at more, rather than just looking at the demographic characteristic of a person, right? You also need to look at psychographic, skills and expertise, like a kind of professional profile of a person. And that basically determines whether you are fitting into a movement, into a structure, into an organization, right? Again, going back to my definition of leadership, leadership is about authority and empathy, right? When it comes to empathy and you being a leader, whether you're a female leader, male leader, whatever nationality, you need to be empathetic, right? Which means that, of course, you need to have a group of people who actually do trust you with some of the vision, with the narrative. But you also have a group of people who would challenge you. And it's important to have empathy and understanding with both of those groups, right? Because otherwise your leadership will not be successful, right? So empathy in that way is very important. Whether men are more empathetic or women, we can argue, and I guess it really depends on the vertical that we are talking about, right? And when it comes to authority, to me, authority equals skills and expertise, right? I respect you because you uphold certain knowledge and certain experience that majority don't, right? And therefore you're empowered to speak up or maybe make certain decisions and all that, right? So it's authority, the true authority, not self-appointed authority, but it's a true authority through skills and expertise, right? So I think diversity of the skill set, right? Diversity of professional expertise and diversity of psychographic profile is very important to build this, to build the effective movement, right? Because within a movement, there always have to be someone who would challenge your ideas. You need to have different perspectives, right? If you just get, let's say, an organization and project it into a movement, right? Within the organization, it is important to have someone who is very organized, structured, and strategic. And you need to get someone who is very empathetic, is very people-centric, development-centric, so both are equally important, right? So yeah, when it comes to, I think, diversity, when we build, let's say, the Sky movement, for example, right? We have people from different backgrounds. We have an advisory committee of 10 girls who are not employees of sorry, who are not employee of Tandem. They're advisory groups of teen girls from different backgrounds, from different, cultural, economic, educational, religious background, who come together and tell us whether this would work or not, right? Now, essentially the decision then whether we are going ahead with certain things lies with us, but it's important to hear that, right? So in that way, we just make sure that we have a representation, we have voices from people outside of our organization, from our target audience, right? From our people, to actually tell us or reassure us that we are on the right track or not,
Yeah.
To me, that's the inclusivity and equality that like I have in mind.
Yeah, I love that. Empathy being one of the biggest things that we ought to be doing, and just understanding where our audience is coming from in order to be very deliberate with the solutions that we're coming with. And before we continue, there's just a question that I've seen over here, and I'd like to invite anyone to just answer. It's from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, what is the most game-changing innovation that we are likely to witness in the near future when it comes to building movements? So, Washara, Svet, anybody can take up that question.
That's a very, very interesting question. To me, I feel like something that we are currently attempting to do. First of all, the current movement that is happening now is significantly different from any other movements that happened before. How is it being communicated and coordinated, right? How people are staying up to date and all that. But I feel like I might be too futuristic. But there's something that we are currently building within our organization is gamification and stimulation, right? I am not sure if it's going to be something of a big scale, but to me, it's important for people, and especially the target audience that we're dealing with, minus the teenagers, right? Who have a lot of ambition, have a lot of emotions, sometimes conflicting and mixed emotions, and little comprehension of on the consequences of certain decisions and certain actions. The simulation that is built on the choices, and can demonstrate what each choice can lead to, could be a very powerful tool, right? So maybe it's a gamification based on AI, but I feel like there is definitely going to be some sort of a tech, what was done with finance bill, and like all this innovation that is happening that made everything so simple to understand, right? How many of us actually went back to Constitution or the finance bill and actually read it? But I think with this movement, there was such a massive interest in politics and the Constitution and law. And while the subject is very complex, technology helped to break it down, right? So I feel like the tech, in our case with Sky, it's going to make gamification and simulation would be one of the biggest game changer.
Super. Thank you for that, Washara.
I honestly don't know. I can't speak into the future, but I will say for a fact, social media has been a game changer in terms of movement building. For me, I think it's just seeing how, especially in Kenya, I feel like Kenya is a unique space in terms of the way we've used, especially Twitter or now X, in building, more or less social movements. I think the best person who's described this is Nanjala Nyabaloa in her book, Analog Politics and a digital democracy in Kenya. I can't really remember the name of that article, but I will say, like, honestly, social media and the use of something like TikTok has been a game changer in disseminating information, mobilizing people, etc. And I will say this in the positive way of building movements, but also in the negative way of facilitating political ideologies and things that aren't right. So, for example, with the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal in Kenya in 2016, with also the whole thing of Meta being taken to court over the genocides that have happened in Southeast Asia, South Asia or Southeast Asia, I can't remember the country, and also Ethiopia and so on. I honestly do think social media is the game changer. In the future, maybe AI can also be a game changer, but I don't see. Well, I guess, yeah, AI, especially right now with the Reject Finance Bill protest, there's been people who've been coming up with AI tools to help you understand legislation and read it in a way that's comprehensive and easy to understand and in small bite sizes. So yeah, that's what I'll say. Those are the two things that I think were game changers in movement building.
Super interesting, and I love that you brought up the aspect of Nanjala, who actually an hour ago made this tweet. Do you still call them tweets because it's X now? But she says,
I think just call them tweets. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still tweets. Yeah. She says just literally an hour ago, what doesn't get done because you're chasing techno solutions is part of the equation of the value that technology does or doesn't add, which speaks to what you were saying, Washera, just the aspect of, even with this whole conversation we've been having around, the finance bill, and Kenyan tech is coming together and creating, different platforms where you can be able to just really question, what is this finance bill about? How does it affect me as a techie, as a person in digital marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So not losing the fact that, social media and AI and technology becomes, the next big thing that, kind of creates that space and creates that conversation that we need to have. As we come to the close, there's a couple of quotes that we had seen around movement building that I'd like to share, and then I can invite you for your final thoughts or advice to the movement builders in the house. One is by Margaret Mead, who says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And this really has been, we can attribute even with what we've been seeing with the Reject the Finance Bill conversation, how just from young people, from their own voices, with their own platforms that they have, being X, being TikTok, were able to really just change how people were thinking around and about, how do I become an active citizen? We have another from Barack Obama that says, "Change does not come if we wait or for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." And I relate this to a quote by a famous poet, rapper, musician, aka Giuliani, who says, they say young people are the leaders of tomorrow, but that tomorrow is the today we were promised yesterday. So we are that change that we seek in the now. Theodore Roosevelt also tells us that do what you can with what you have where you are. And again, literally, this is what happened with the Reject the Finance Bill conversation, because what we had is TikTok to be able to educate, to be able to teach people about what the finance bill encompasses and how it is that you can actually make your voice heard. Utilizing also X to show young people that you have the power to not only effect change, but also effect a systemic change beyond just the finance bill. It's now, how are we going to be, for instance, recalling your MPs or putting them on the spotlight and showing that you're not listening to us as the people who voted you in, which links to the next quote by Malala, is that a single voice can spark a movement, a single conversation, a single word, a single initiative led by young people, by the people who are being affected by the problem that we're talking about, can actually spark an entire movement that effects change in societies, in communities. And finally, one by Martin Luther King is that you don't have to have a college degree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul that is generated by love. Is that at the end of the day, It's really not about what are the qualifications that you have. It's not about, you know, are we saying that you are a graduate from Harvard or from Yale or from USIU, whatever it may be. It's really just that heart that allows you to see that there's a problem that I need to change within my society. And this is the thing that I can bring to the table. And these are just some of the quotes that we look at and we reference when it comes to movement building, when it comes to trying to understand how it is that we can effect change from our own small places. And so I come back to you, our dear panelists, to just ask. In the room today, we have different either movement builders currently or aspiring to be movement builders. What would be your call to action or your final advice to us?
Sorry, could you please ask that question again?
Yeah, again. So as I mentioned, in the room today, in the space that we have here, is that we have aspiring movement builders. We have people who are already within or working within movements. We have practitioners in the movement building space. So what would be your call to action for us, or what would be your final thoughts and advice for the people who have joined us today?
So for me, I will always go back to the philosophy that underpins all the work that I do, which is Ubuntu, which is the African philosophy of recognizing our interconnected nature. Ubuntu, as many people like to say, is I am because you are. In the world that we live in and in the work that we're doing, especially for social impact, we need to understand that community is all we have. Whether you're in the corporate world, in university, in social movement building, in things that are more social work based in nature or more corporate, community is all you have. So I will say ensure that you have a solid community of like-minded people around you. Yeah, that's my last piece of advice.
Thank you very much.
From my standpoint, I think as we're building movements and we're building the community, I think understanding your skill set and what you bring to the table is very important. And basically understanding the skill set is for collective good, right? So you're not chipping for the sake of chipping in, you're not just blindly joining the movement or nodding a head or kind of building a position, but you also understand that there's certain knowledge I possess, there's certain skills I have that can contribute to the movement, right? Especially in the current world, I think it's very important to understand what is the truth that I hold, because it could easily be influenced by so many voices out there. And it's almost like it's important to have some sort of filter, right? Who do I respect as an authority, as a person with great knowledge and expertise in certain subjects, and that voice should dominate, right? Because that voice is aligned with my beliefs, is aligned with my values, it's aligned with my vision. I think that is very, very important, because as you build a movement, it's so easy to be swayed to completely different direction. And I'm not talking only about the political movements. I'm talking about any other social movements that are out there. Just a quick example, when it comes to, let's say, even Sky, there's so many organizations that would come and say, oh, let's talk about this. We fund you for this issue, push this message for us. We had to be very strategic with what issue we are actually bringing on board and what issue would actually help our audience to move ahead in life. Sometimes it was very tempting, because the funding, the budget, the amounts were really great, but we actually had to stay true to our strategy, to our vision, to our mission, and sometimes say no, right? Simply because we're very kind of focused on our end goal, right? How we are actually positively transforming their lives. How do we positively empower the youth? So yes, having basically very clear understanding, clarity for yourself, right? What are my values, what I believe in, who are people out there, who the authorities out there that actually represent it very well, is something very important to build the sustainable movements.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much to you, Svetlana, and to you, Ashara. I keep on in the team. They say, "Oh, Rashid is a movement builder," but I love to learn more from every person that I interact with. Just hearing from you today, and seeing what are the different aspects that we need to think about. Being very intentional about being intersectional with our conversation, having empathy for understanding, because that allows us to really create something that makes sense for our end user, and also authority is equals to skills and expertise. I love what you say, Washera, that always ensure that you have a community behind you, a community that is supporting, and a community that can also take ownership of whatever is the product that you're trying to create, that allows us to move to the next step. It's about understanding what is the skill set that you have, what is the resource that you are currently holding that can ensure that even for the movement that you're creating, for the movement and the impact that you're trying to kind of have, that you're not really falling behind or putting too much on your shoulders. And don't be afraid to say no sometimes. Don't be afraid to say that this doesn't align to the goals and the objectives that we have, but this is kind of the direction that we're taking. So thank you so much. I really want to send a heartfelt thanks to you, Ashera, and to you, Svetlana, for joining us today. I apologize once again on behalf of the team for the kind of mishap and the technology conversation or problem that we had at the beginning. Again, I said I'd like to blame the government, but this one was completely on us. So my apologies for that, but thank you so much for taking of your time and joining us in this conversation. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for really just giving us your insights. It's nothing that we take for granted, because it allows us to really see and understand what is the next step for movement building. So to our participants, again, as we come to the closeout of our webinar today, which is around the art and science of movement building, I want to also send a heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for participating and engaging. As we have had, movement building is not just a thing that happens on its own. It requires vision, it requires strategy, and it also requires your unwavering commitment. It demands that you're able to adapt to what is happening and what is shifting in the conversation, in the environment. And in the face of different challenges, is just being able to also, understand and shift to that and adapt to those, and being able to just inspire and mobilize others. As we have discussed today, leadership, technology, and also understanding the different cultural contexts all play a crucial role in the process and the dynamic process of movement building. I hope that you are able to live today with a deeper understanding of how movements are, of how movements are built, of how movements are crafted and renewed in the sense of inspiring others to engage and support. And also, I hope that it resonates with your own values and your own aspirations. Remember that every great movement started with individuals who dared to believe that they would be able to make a change. Whether we're talking about the Black Lives Movement, whether we're talking about Greta Thunberg, who was talking about climate change, whether we are talking about the Gen Zs in Kenya, who created an entire tribeless, faceless, leaderless movement just to be able to effect change around how leadership and governance happens in this country. It really just starts with that individual kind of understanding and individual motivation to be able to move to the next step. Finally, as is the slide that currently shows, I'd like to invite you all to be a part of what is our next Last Thursday session. And in the next one, we'll be looking at navigating the social impact ecosystem by affiliation. This is a conversation by consultants in the social impact space. And we're going to be speaking about their experiences. We're going to be sharing best practices on how to best be at your game, and most importantly, the meaningful and ethical client and relationships management. Once you provide a service to a business, to an institution, to an organization, you automatically become affiliated to them in one sense or the other. And your name has to contribute positively to their success, and even though you're not employed by them as a staff. And so as you hold this, that's the whole aspect of the term affiliation. So here in this conversation, we will be having some of our affiliates at Development Dynamics, but we're all affiliates in different forms. So how do we define this term for us as consultants seeking to remain change agents within the social impact world? How do we better strategize around remuneration, around partnerships, around even recognizing the effort that has been taken in order to come to the final solution? How do we also reduce negative competition among us as consultants? How do we collaborate better when opportunities beyond our scope arise? How do we de-silo, stop working in silos, defragment that entire space of consultancy and the consultancy industry? This is a conversation that everyone and no one should miss, because whether we are in full-time employment or working as full-time consultants, we are intentionally or otherwise affiliates. And our amazing host will be Lisa Marianne, who works with us and for us at Development Dynamics, and she'd be able to just take us through that, navigate that entire conversation, and help us come to that whole wholesome solution of what does it mean to be a consultant? How do we continue being consultants in this ever-shifting, ever-dynamic space? And how do we ensure that we work collaboratively together just to ensure that there's continuity with the clients that we're serving? So once again, I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank our panelists for their insights, for their commitment, and I want to thank everybody who joined, just being also in this space to learn about the powerful dynamics of movement building. Let us carry forward the lessons of today to foster change and drive impact in our communities and beyond. Once again, I've been your host, Rashid Mutaha. I want to also thank my colleague, Moses Mwai, for taking over in the first half of this conversation, just to be able to ensure that there's continuity and the conversation is continuing. And thank you all for everyone who has joined. I leave you with this: stay connected, stay inspired, and keep building those movements. Thank you very much, and goodbye to you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Right, I think it's just us team members. Hi.
Stop the recording.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me